Intellectuals, students, or even being literate was the biggest threat to survival there. In Cambodia, that was the situation. Minority communities were the country's biggest enemies for him. Roughly 1.7 million Cambodians, about one-fourth, died during those 4 years. Following any religion was, according to him, treason. So, what was good for him? A Cambodia where everyone was the same, everyone did the same work, neither thought nor questioned anything. Music. But even after all this, the people of his country considered him a visionary leader. Mao Zedong, the biggest leader of China, music, for whom tradition was like a disease. Religion was a part of backwardness. Individual opinion was the biggest rebellion. History, culture, emotions were only valid as long as they served his ideology. And because of this, he brought about a cultural revolution where teachers, scholars, and artists were publicly killed. But still, even today, he is considered a national hero of China. His photo is on the Chinese currency. Music, and there are many such leaders, from Joseph Stalin to Adolf Hitler. An entire list of such leaders is filled with those who have killed millions of people for their goals. Yet, for millions of people, they were a national hero and a great leader. And they were able to do this because they had a secret rulebook which they used to achieve any desired goal, and no one could question them for it. The question is, what were these secret rules, and what was so special about them that could completely change the truth, that could show the wrong as right and the right as wrong? What methods are in that rulebook that can be used to change the thinking of not one, but an entire country? And what was in it that, even today, our leaders follow when needed to control our minds, our truth, our emotions? Today, we will understand the 5 most frequently used rules from that secret rulebook through this documentary, which can be used to easily manipulate any thinking person and distort any truth. And if you understand these rules well, and how different leaders have used these rules the next time someone tries to distort your truth through the media, use your emotions for their benefit, or try to shape your thinking, you won't fall victim to their conspiracy, and you will know exactly which of these rules are being used to manipulate you. So, are you ready to know these rules? Not taken any powers. What? So we are functioning absolutely within the Constitution. Music. In today's time, whether you are an engineer, a doctor, a teacher, or a student, there is one thing that can increase your growth by 5x, 10x, or even 20x, and that is content creation. Think of a teacher who is limited to only 60 students in his class. On the other hand, there is another teacher who may be slightly less knowledgeable but knows the game of content creation and is able to reach thousands of children with his message. Create an impact and increase his earnings 10x, 20x compared to the first teacher. You are a student who is brilliant in academics, very talented, but is wandering for jobs after completing the degree. On the other hand, another student who may be less brilliant than you, less intelligent than you, but understood the game of content creation and focused on building a personal brand alongside their studies, and even before completing their degree, opportunities are knocking on their door themselves. You are a small business owner who is only able to sell products in your neighborhood. On the other hand, another small business owner who knows the game of content creation is able to sell his products across India or even globally and increase his revenue 10x, 20x. This entire game is possible through content creation. And I know that most of you viewers who are watching this documentary have already tried creating content. But the problem is that you don't understand how these things work overall. I upload content, but it gets no reach. And this happens because you don't know exactly how this entire content creation game works. And I have brought the solution to this problem. Next Sunday, August 31st at 12 p.m., a 1-hour live content creation masterclass where I will tell you my 6-step framework live. Using this, you will start your content creation journey, and by going through this entire framework, you will be able to monetize this entire journey at the end and grow 5x, 10x, in whatever field you are in. And at the end of this live class, there will be a 30-minute live Q&A session where you can directly ask your doubts about your content creation journey. So, I am putting the link to the masterclass in the description. You can join this masterclass from there. Because it is live, the seats are very limited. Book your seat before they are full. So now, let's get back to this epic and powerful documentary. Music, September 11th, 2001, United States. Like any ordinary day, people were busy with their daily routines in the morning. Coffee shops were crowded. People were leaving for their offices. The same daily headlines were running on the news channels. Then suddenly, at 8:46 a.m., a Boeing 767 jet hits the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York, and there is a huge explosion. Music. Thousands of people die within minutes. People are scared, confused. They don't understand what is happening. And then, 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., another plane hits the South Tower of the same World Trade Center. People are still trying to understand these things when, a little later, at 9:37 a.m., another plane crashes into the United States Defense Department, the Pentagon. And there was still one last plane left, which crashes in a farm in Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. In just 77 minutes, the world's biggest superpower country had fallen victim to history's biggest terrorist attack. Speculation mounted, and Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for this attack. The whole of America was in shock from this event and was demanding answers from the president. Immediately after the attack, U.S. President George Bush held an emergency meeting with his War Council to respond to Al-Qaeda and Afghanistan. But there was one more person in this meeting whose mind was running with a different plan. Paul Wolfowitz, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to carry out a completely different plan. But why would he want to execute another plan in the middle of such a crucial attack? And what exactly was that plan? That plan was the Middle East's black gold, meaning oil. And the main target of this plan was Iraq. Iraq, where Kurdish rebels in the north were standing against their president Saddam, and the U.S. had already built its military base near the Kuwait border in the south. And in these areas was the world's fifth largest oil reserve. And apart from this oil, Saddam Hussein's rapidly growing influence in the Middle East and his military power were the biggest obstacles to America's dream of controlling the Middle East. And to execute this idea, the USA told the world that Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein were secretly in alliance. And now Iraq was building weapons of mass destruction, WMD, so that it could carry out several incidents like 9/11 in the future. And based on these claims, the invasion of Iraq was launched. But how did they find out that Iraq had WMD? Well, the basis of this story was a British intelligence report. But the shocking thing is that the primary source of the intelligence report on which this entire story was built was a 1991 PhD thesis by an Iraqi-American student, Ibrahim al-Marashi, on my article and Up, and a British intelligence parliamentary document that justified an invasion of. Think about it. A 10-year-old PhD thesis was presented in such a way it was so distorted and exaggerated, and a narrative was built at such a level that the invasion of Iraq became necessary for the safety of the world. Millions of Iraqis were killed. The country's oil fields were controlled. That country was completely destroyed economically. All this just with a carefully planned narrative. By now, you must have understood how a narrative gave the USA the moral license to justify a full-scale war, rising from a global tragedy. And this is rule number 1 for controlling our truth. Build a narrative. So now the question is, how is this narrative built? How are millions of people forced to believe a story as the truth, even without forcing them? For this, you have to go through 4 steps. Step 1. Trigger emotions: fear, pain, anger, revenge, confusion. All these emotions act as fuel for us. And when these emotions are at their peak, that is the perfect moment to build a desired narrative for one's own benefit. For example, after the 9/11 attack in the USA, people were scared, feeling helpless. They wanted revenge, and this was a perfect moment to build a narrative. Step 2. Introduce a villain. Just as every story needs a villain, building a narrative also requires a villain, like the USA did with Iraq and Saddam Hussein, while their real motive was something else: oil and soft control over the Middle East. Step 3. Write the story. Now you have emotions, you have a villain. You just have to write a story that, after listening to it, no one talks about facts and figures, only emotion-driven logic. Like the USA's story of weapons of mass destruction. The question here is not whether Saddam Hussein was actually a hero or a villain, but the question is how the whole world was scared of him. He was portrayed as a villain, and Iraq was described as a threat to the world, even for WMD that have never been proven to this day. There was only emotion-driven logic in this story. Step 4. Become the hero. After telling the story, there must be a hero to save the people, right? Now that people's emotions have been triggered, someone is needed as the savior, as the hero. For example, in this narrative, the USA became the hero who saves the world. You will observe this 4-step blueprint around you. Somewhere, many leaders have been copying and pasting this blueprint to achieve their goals. Music. The year 1970, the darkest period of Indian history. A period when inflation was at its peak. Unemployment was spreading rapidly. Every middle-class person was fed up with the rising rates of electricity and ration. Corruption was open at every level, from a peon to a chief minister. Everyone, from students to professionals, was protesting everywhere. Petrol prices had increased by up to 300%. From royal families to big businessmen, everyone was against the government. And amidst all this came the day, June 12, 1975, when the Allahabad High Court gave a historical verdict. Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha cancelled the Raebareli Lok Sabha seat of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and banned her from contesting elections for the next 6 years. But what had happened that such a strict decision was taken against a prime minister? What happened was that her opposition candidate, Raj Narain, had filed 14 allegations against her, and out of those 14, 2 allegations were proven in court. But what were those allegations? One allegation was that government resources were used for the stage setup for her election speech, and the second was that she took help from a gazetted government officer, Yashpal Kaur, for her election-related work. And now, Indira Gandhi had no choice but to challenge this decision in the Supreme Court. On June 24, 1975, the Supreme Court heard Indira Gandhi's appeal and, while staying the Allahabad High Court's decision, stated that she could remain in the post of Prime Minister until the next hearing. And now, Indira Gandhi only had time until the next hearing to save her seat. On the night of June 25, 1975, Indira Gandhi wrote a letter to President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, and on the morning of June 26, 1975, when people woke up, there was no news, because by then, everything had changed. Opposition leaders sitting in rallies like Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Morarji Desai, L.K. Advani, and many other big leaders were arrested in the middle of the night, and in the morning, Indira Gandhi announced on the radio, "I want to assure you that the declaration of this new emergency will not affect the rights of law-abiding citizens." But what was the reason behind imposing this emergency? Was India going to be attacked by any foreign country, or was India involved in a war? No, the official reason given was internal disturbance, meaning a threat to the country's security due to problems going on within the country. And just by giving this reason, the president's signature converted democracy into dictatorship. And now she had only one way to stabilize her position: censorship, through which the truth could be suppressed and a new truth could be created for the people. And that's what was done. The power supply of all newspaper offices was cut off in the middle of the night. News offices were repeatedly raided everywhere. Ground rules and guidelines were issued for news journalists and governance, and they had to take permission from the chief press advisor before printing anything. Some news houses became completely silent, and some, like the Indian Express and the Statesman, left their editorial pages blank to show their protest. And the fate of journalists who spoke out was jail. By the year 1976, almost 7,000 journalists had been sent to jail. Many organizations were also banned during the entire emergency period. Even more than 1 lakh people were sent to jail. And this is our rule number 2, censorship. When a narrative is built, censorship is used to suppress the questions arising on that narrative. But in today's time, it is not possible to directly control the entire media. Some tactics have to be followed for that. Tactic 1. Legal harassment. In this tactic, the law is misused, not used. Whether it is a sedition law, defamation law, or anti-terror law. A SLAPP, strategic lawsuit against public participation, is filed against any media house or journalist. Like the misuse of MISA, Maintenance of Internal Security Act, during the emergency, where thousands of people were jailed without trial. The goal in this tactic is not to win the case. The main goal is to target the time, money, and patience of the media and journalists. Tactic 2. Economic pressure. If you want to control any media house, the easiest way is to cut off their financial oxygen, such as removing government aid revenue, imposing restrictions on foreign funding through FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, getting raids done by IT, ED, CBI, and when all this does not work, finally getting a hostile takeover. Just as the government ads revenue of the Indian Express was stopped after they printed a blank editorial during the emergency. And if you want to understand this whole thing in depth, you can watch Part 1 of our documentary, whose link I have given in the description. Tactic 3. Use fear as a message. If the press cannot be controlled even with law and money, there is one last option left. Fear. Not just physical fear, but psychological fear. Such psychological fear where a journalist has to think about their family before writing something, where they have to ask themselves before publishing anything, can I go to jail? Will there be a notice on this? During the emergency, journalists were sent to jail. But today, this jail is invisible, where they are so scared and threatened, from threat calls to social media trolling, that people think 100 times before speaking the truth. And when there are no truth speakers left, then. Music. The year 1925. Germany. In a dark room of Landsberg prison, a man was writing his autobiography. His struggles, his failures, his achievements, everything was going normally like an autobiography. But then a new chapter began. Nation and race. And this chapter was going to decide the future of not only him, but also millions of other people in just a short time. But what was in that chapter? In that chapter, the world was divided into 2 parts, superior and inferior, because, according to the writer, there was only one race that was the most intelligent, powerful, and disciplined, and it was the one that could rule the world. He believed that culture, science, and technology were all originated by one race, and that race was the Aryans, and specifically the Nordic Germans among the Aryans. And by now, you must have guessed who was writing this autobiography. The person writing this book was none other than Adolf Hitler, and the title of the book was Mein Kampf. But for Hitler, just saying this was not enough. He needed proof or some scientific backing or some theory in the name of science that could prove his agenda. But the question is, what theory convinced Hitler that Nordic Germans were born to rule the whole world? That theory is the world's most famous survival theory, social Darwinism, and its core concept was the survival of the fittest. Darwin had said that our nature is like a battlefield, where every species fights to survive. The one whose adaptability and intelligence are the highest is the one that survives, and the rest of the species slowly become extinct. But what is the connection between this theory and Hitler's claim? There is a connection. Hitler wanted something related to science so that his theory would feel like it had already been scientifically discussed. That is why he twisted this theory and told people that the race that is the fittest can rule the world. And for Hitler, being fit meant Nordic Germans. And everyone who did not fit into this definition was inferior. And he mentioned this in his book, turning a biological theory into a political weapon. At that time, this book was not noticed much, but after Hitler came to power, the popularity of this book increased very rapidly, and after this, the game of misinformation began. In his book, he divided the world into us versus them in the name of superiority, but this was just the beginning. After coming to power, Hitler chose his biggest target, the Jews, and for that, he made religion the emotional weapon of his misinformation. But how? Well, by reviving a second-century-old Christian myth. But what was this myth? Biblical passage, Matthew chapter 27, verses 24 and 25, shows a conversation in which Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor, washes his blood-stained hands during the trial, stating that he is not responsible for Jesus' death. And the crowd standing there answers, "His blood be on us and on our children." And this crowd was a Jewish crowd because this event happened during the Jewish festival of Passover. And by respreading this myth, Hitler started blaming all generations of Jews for the death of Jesus. But this alone was not enough. Hitler spread another myth: stab in the back. During World War I, the German army blamed their defeat on the treachery of politicians. Hitler used this to spread another myth and shifted the blame for this event onto Jewish socialist and democratic leaders. And these theories became the reason for Hitler starting World War II, where Hitler's sole purpose was to establish the rule of the pure Aryan race all over Europe. Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, France, Yugoslavia, Greece, Albania, Montenegro, one after the other, all these countries came under Nazi rule, and by carrying out an industrial-scale genocide, he brutally killed more than 60 lakh Jews. Look, like walking skeletons, many inmates are sick and are dying from typhus epidemics and starvation, and all this was possible because of the misinformation he spread. And this is our Rule 3, spreading misinformation. When there is a powerful narrative and censorship, a lot of misinformation is injected into it. And there are only two tools to build this misinformation. Tool 1. Use authority. The job of this tool is to link the lie with authority, meaning linking it with things that people already blindly believe in, such as science, religion, scriptures, national heroes, because when these are included in a story, people will not question but will believe it without thinking. Like Hitler did, by aligning his racial theory with science and his hatred for Jews with religion and nationality. Tool 2. Repeat lie until it becomes truth. Speaking misinformation once can cause doubt, or even a single person speaking it can cause doubt. But if many people say it repeatedly, like Hitler did, first in his book, then in his speeches after coming to power, and then by spreading the same type of misinformation repeatedly in schools, universities, posters, radio, newspapers, everywhere. Music. The year was 1924. The people of the Soviet Union were going through their biggest loss because their founding father and revolutionary hero, Vladimir Lenin, had passed away. And there was only one question in the minds of the entire nation: who would be the next leader? Among the top contenders of the party there was a name, Joseph Stalin, about whom Lenin had written something in his last letter before dying. But what exactly did Lenin write about Stalin? The letter said, "Stalin is too rude. He should be removed." But how did a person whom Lenin had asked to be removed, whom Lenin had called very rude, become a top contender? What happened was that after Lenin's death, Stalin had only one way to become the next leader, and that was to appear as Lenin's closest person. But he was Lenin's most disliked person. So, how could he look close to Lenin? This is a picture of Lenin and Stalin from that time. If you look closely, you will not see any special connection between Lenin and Stalin in it. But what if these two are made to look close in this picture? Stalin did exactly this. He made this picture the world's first edited picture, where, to show himself close to Lenin, he edited the picture through airbrush and brought the two closer, and to show himself as Lenin's next heir, he made his image much bigger compared to Lenin. And more than 5 lakh copies of this picture were spread everywhere in the entire Soviet Union. And to create public perception, he started removing other revolutionary heroes and people close to Lenin from pictures so that people would feel that only Stalin was worthy of becoming the next leader. Along with this, he had created a good image of himself in the hearts of the people. But now it was time to build a cult of personality. For that, immediately after coming to power, he started changing history. From the textbooks of every historical revolution to the news, he started portraying himself as a great hero. Stalin took credit for every good event and every revolution. Along with this, in all the information being shared through the media, he started frequently using words like great, beloved, bold, wise, inspired, genius, and father of the nation with his name. With the invention of films, he started making films that could build a cult of personality in the minds of the people. In many movies like Battleship Potemkin, Ivan the Terrible, The Fall of Berlin, Stalin portrayed himself as a fatherly voice and a heroic figure. And after all these actions, Stalin succeeded in building his cult of personality over time. People were so inspired by him that they created Stalin rooms in their homes in his name, where they showed their loyalty and devotion in front of his portrait. And this is our Rule 4. Build a cult personality. Cult of personality means making the leader a symbol that no one questions, no one doubts, and no one opposes. And to create such a personality, leaders follow 5 steps. Step 1. Link yourself with a legacy. Such a legacy that people highly respect, such as a national hero, a religion, or an ideology. People already respect that legacy, and the leader's job is just to build his cult of personality while continuing that legacy. Step 2. Control all imagery and symbols, because what is seen is sold. Putting up your photos, statues, posters, slogans everywhere. Taking credit for every good deed. Printing your pictures in the largest size, showing the same face everywhere, from the media to textbooks, like Stalin did by spreading 5 lakh copies of his pictures everywhere. Step 3. Rewrite the history. Slowly taking credit for every important national achievement. Framing oneself in such a way in books, films, stories, news that the central figure of every event is only and only that leader, and the whole story revolves around him, like Stalin did, by exaggerating his role in the revolution in every picture everywhere. Step 4. Use emotional labels. Attaching such emotional labels to your work that build your cult of personality. Using the same label repeatedly with the name in the media. People may not pay attention to that label, but that label gets attached to your name forever in their brain, like Stalin did, by attaching great, beloved, father of the nation to his name. And the last step is step 5, loyalty. After following these 4 steps, a time will come when people will start believing that disagreement with that leader means disagreement with the country. Then, a leader's cult of personality is fully built, when one is called a traitor or a betrayer for speaking against them. And by following these steps, Stalin gained control over the Soviet Union, and controlled it in such a way that anyone who spoke against him was put in jail. And this power came not from politics but from a cult of personality. Music. The year was 1799. Napoleon Bonaparte, a general who rose from a small Corsican island, had overthrown the long-standing monarchy of France, and now he slowly wanted to bring the revolutionary fire of France to other European countries and capture them. He succeeded in capturing Austria, Italy, and Spain one by one. And now it was the turn of Russia. Russia was a country whose army was feared by the whole of Europe. Russia had intellectuals for its army and lines of generals. But still, on October 14, 1806, Napoleon's troops attacked Russia, and within a short time, a powerful empire like Russia was defeated by Napoleon's army. An empire whose pride was its military strength. Its army was completely broken. They realized that their soldiers were listening to orders, but they were thinking for themselves what would be the best thing to do. And after that, they were questioning, and because of this process, there was a delay in actions, and the conclusion of their defeat came out to be the soldiers' own thinking. And now, to win, they needed soldiers who would neither think nor question nor stop anywhere, but just follow. And from here, the world's first mass self-controlled system was born. And its mission was obedience, punctuality, and blind nationalism. Neither question, nor logic, nor creativity. Just order, discipline, obedience. And by now, you must have guessed. This system was the world's first mass education system, the Prussian education system, on which I have already made a detailed documentary, The Education Trap, which you can watch. I will put the link in the description. This education system created a disciplined generation that, without questioning, entered the military, civil services, and factory jobs. Slowly, this Prussian model became the blueprint for the education system of the whole world, and the leaders of those countries started deciding what to teach and what not to teach. And people's mindsets were built according to what those leaders wanted. And today, the leaders of almost all countries use this education system to build their propaganda and narrative. And this is our rule number 5. Control the education system for your own benefit. Because if a person is taught to think in a fixed way from childhood, they will not become an obstacle in your work when they grow up. Their actions can be predicted, and those actions can be used for your benefit. Like how people's way of thinking was controlled through the Prussian education system. And as soon as attention is diverted from their critical thinking skills using the education system, a factory of loyal citizens will be found, whose chances of raising questions and challenging you will be very low. Now, they don't just control the media. Now they have also controlled people's way of thinking. Now, what people will watch, what they will believe as truth, what they will believe as a lie, even how they will think, will also be decided by those who control that education system. And in this way, by following these rules, any democracy can be made a controlled democracy, for which, first, a narrative is built. Censorship is brought in so that no one can know the truth of that narrative. Misinformation is injected to carry out desired work without any trouble. And after all this, the goal of any leader is to make their personality a cult. And finally, the education system is used to control the way of thinking of the coming generation. And as soon as their way of thinking is controlled, their questions, their emotions, their vote, everything comes under their control. And they don't even know that their way of thinking has been controlled. Because what they read, what they saw, how they thought, everything was systematically designed. And now that you have understood these 5 rules, observe around you. Do you see any carefully built narrative? Is the voice of any media being censored somewhere? Is any suspicious activity or misinformation being spread around you? Is questioning a cult leader getting you called a traitor or a betrayer? Is your way of thinking being manipulated by your textbooks? And now, after knowing all this, the question arises. Now, if any leader wants to control your truth, control your thinking, will you fall victim to their motive, or will you escape their deception after knowing these rules? Thank you so much for watching this documentary till the end. I hope you like this documentary very much and learned something from it. If you have any suggestions, please tell me in the comment section, and you can support me and help this channel grow by subscribing to this channel and sharing this video. So, I will meet you very soon in the next documentary. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.